In this final segment of our Versus series on ShatterCast, things are getting physical.
Let's move away from lies and fears.
Perhaps it's time to leave.
Free from how you look or what they say. Like a lion runs wild through the wilderness. Free from showing off a living fate. Like the eagles flying high, dancing with the air. There's breath in your lungs to breathe. Say, God, take this mask away. You see, he won't let you stay. Living in hollow days.
Or are things getting digital? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Physical versus digital games. So basically, you know how when you buy a game for the PlayStation 4, maybe like Spider-Man, I have a physical copy. Well, I don't have a physical copy. He has my physical copy.
I borrowed it.
But if you're playing games on a PC, it's
Technicalities.
stole it. If you're playing games on a PC, more often than not, they're probably mostly digital purchases. Especially these days, it's exceedingly difficult to find like an actual physical copy of a PC game because you're buying them through Steam or Origins or GOG or one of the other. Epic, right? Epic has one. A lot of companies have them. They're cropping up like video streaming services these days. But there's pros and cons to that. You know, physical games versus digital games. You might have the same game, but two different copies of it, and there's going to be pros and cons.
I haven't had two different copies of the same game.
Well, okay, that's fair. That's what I mean.
Why would I buy two copies of the same
That's fair.
game?
What
John? Why?
Why, John?
Why would give you
Maybe
that?
one's
Is this like a race
expansion.
thing? What's going on here?
Okay, yeah, like okay.
A collector's edition. I'm sorry to help you, but
What I mean is, if you have not a person, I mean like the ethereal meaning of you have. Like, okay, you have two cars. I don't mean Joel has two cars. I mean,
wish I had two
if
cars.
you have Spider-Man right here, okay, you've got the physical copy of.
All I see is a hand, dude.
Well, if Derek has Spider,
He actually does. Yeah,
physical.
but you don't have Spider-Man.
What's happening? What's happening?
Let's just keep going.
I haven't even like done anything yet. It's been like 3 minutes. So, if you have the physical copy of Spider-Man and you have a digital copy of Spider-Man, there are different implications, right? Most digital games you don't actually buy. If I own a copy of Spider-Man 4 digitally for the PlayStation, usually if you get into the fine points of the agreement that you sign when you buy the game, you're actually owning a license to play it. A lot of that language is in physical copies too, but it's a lot easier for them to just shut down a server and suddenly you can't access Spider-Man 4 if you own it digitally. Whereas if you have a hard copy of the game, it's less likely for you to lose access to that game in the future because you actually have that physical copy of the game. If you guys remember years ago, there was that game Flappy Bird for mobile games, and it was like one of those first early infuriating games. You might recognize it if I showed it to you, but it was basically like it was an endless scroller, and you were trying to get a bird through all of these different holes as it was traveling through a cave.
There were pipes.
Holes in the pipes.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, so you didn't want to run into a pipe. Anyway, eventually,
sounds like the best game ever.
It was one of those games that people were getting irritated with because it just took forever and you kept dying. You would get like every time you went through a hole, you would get 1 point, and people would get to like 37 points and then die and have to start over. And they were getting so furious that they were actually writing like death threats to the person who created the game. And eventually,
That's too far.
It's way too far. And eventually, he pulled the game off the App Store, and you can't get it anymore unless you have a device that had already installed it. And so, all of that to say that, you know, if you play a mobile game that has microtransactions and you're putting a lot of money into it, say you're what they would call a whale, and you've put $1,000 into this game over the course of a year, buying loot boxes and other stuff, they can just shut the game down. I know, that's why you're a whale. Yeah, it's like because $1,000 is nothing to you. Like there's a lot of people like that in the mobile game realm.
Thank you, Gabe.
I don't know what's happening either. But that company, it's
Go
so
on.
hard.
Hearing
It's
it.
so difficult.
We want to hear what you have to
You're
say,
doing good.
John.
You're doing good.
If that company decides, they could shut the game down tomorrow, and you're just out of luck, no matter how much money you put into the game. So when you don't have a physical copy of the game, it's easier to lose access. It doesn't mean you can't lose access to a physical game that you have. The disc could break. And that's a nice thing about a digital copy. You know, my PS4 could just die tomorrow and I have to buy a completely new one, but I can just restore all of my digital purchases. Whereas if I break a disc, I have to buy the game again. I'm out of luck. So there's pros and cons to each. Thoughts?
Discs are dead. That's when I start on mine.
Wow.
No, because think about it. Like even stuff that's coming out now, then they're making like you're seeing less and less of the disc of like the disc like drive, especially in like the PC world. Like it's like hard to even buy a disc drive anymore. It just doesn't come with it even. And now when it comes to like no like matter what you game with, it seems like then they're trying to promote buying it from their own store in the game. So whether it be like a PS4 or and I was the one who really loved to have my hands on the game booklets like that. But then I just got to a point where it's just now I can just click and I get the game to start, right away. Or you have to download the game first. And that's like a pet like peeve of mine is that you buy the disc and then like you put it into your what you use, whatever, and you have to download that game now.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of beats the whole point of having the disc when like you can't just put it in and play it. Because what was cool is like with like the game like Cube and things like that is like you buy your game, and you just put it in there and you start playing the minute.
That was
like,
an interesting reference of all of the old consoles. He could have picked GameCube.
I choose the GameCube.
It was a good system.
It was a good system anyway. Yeah. So that's like my that's like my thought on it, and I think that we are already starting to see that GameStop is beginning to lose a bunch of money already now.
Well, games like they've moved to so much more merchandise in the store.
Yeah,
when I was
true.
younger, it was just games.
I know, yeah.
And now like it seems like 2/3 of the store is all merchandise these days.
And I'm thinking that within the next 5 years, and who like even knows if they're still gonna be big or there at all. I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of rumors. They're
GameStop.
they're like bleeding money. And it seems like they've been bleeding money for 10 or 12 years. I don't know how they've stayed open, honestly, because the GameStop sentiment is not very positive in the community. Yeah. And I swear every time I go in there, the only people I see buying things are like parents and grandparents for their kids. Like I feel like that's the demographic that's keeping GameStop open is parents buying their kids games and stuff for holidays.
GameStop reminds me a lot of Blockbuster a few years back, and if they don't change their model soon, they might go the way of Blockbuster with having like one store open now. So
So they just need to pull all of the stops if they want to stay alive.
Yeah.
Going back to digital and
Thank you.
physical.
Joel, I'm really glad that you could join us for your last podcast.
I love how we say this every single
We do.
month.
We do. We really do. Get back here, Joel. Get back here. You made a really good point that is a point that I was going to make about back in the day, for sure. When you bought a physical copy of the game, you could immediately play it when you turned on the system.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, and nowadays, whether you buy a physical or a digital, you have to install it still.
And it sucks, man, because you get the game like not the way.
What's the point of having the disc if you still have to install it to a hard
That's what
drive?
I'm talking about.
Gabe, you're gonna say something. Go for it.
Is it more than whale noises?
Yes.
Okay,
I do
great.
have an idea, but
Awesome.
point of view, if you may. Okay, fine.
Has an idea.
One.
Do you have more than one idea? You can share it.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you.
3
So
ideas,
considerate.
no more than 3.
3 ideas. Okay. I remember the times because I used to play
He's
PC
counting.
more of it, right? And PlayStation 1. So anyway, way back in the day.
That was an idea.
So, you know what? I'm not gonna let you see how many ideas I have left.
yeah. We already have 2, man. I'm already going.
Please continue. I'm
So like
sorry.
I remember the times when, as you were saying, like you would only like get one game and just put it in the console and start playing, right? It wasn't the same always for PC. I remember buying, for example, Age of Empires, and it was 2 CDs, and I would put the first one. I would be so excited because I would see like these little animations they would put there when it's like loading the game and like installing it, and then you would get all these hints and all these tips and all that stuff, and then it would be like, okay, put the second disc right now, and you go and you put it there. It's like, oh, it's so exciting because it's the rest of it, and I would like. Well, I still get excited about it, but anyway. So that was something about it, and to your point, like whenever you had the physical copy, if you were to lose one of those 2 games, it wouldn't matter if you had the physical copy or if you were to have a digital copy today, because you would still lose the opportunity to install the game, whether if you change it of computers or something happened to it. So to that point, like SimCity, I remember SimCity. My dad liked it, so I ended up playing it, of course. 4 CDs for that one.
Actually.
Yeah, but it's
I played it because my dad liked it, and I was like,
I'll
play it too.
He was like, oh yeah, I bought you one game. I was like, yeah, okay. And I started.
true.
But 4 CDs though, 4 CDs to install that game, and it was fun. I had a lot of great times, but it wasn't only the CD. Like you would like get all these like tips and the little pamphlet and the booklet, and you would be able to see all the technology trees and all of the little things and all of the hints that they would like write down for you. And I enjoyed just reading those things. Like it was part of the experience of buying the actual physical copy. So it wasn't only digital or physical. It wasn't only about the game. It was everything around it. However, when I came here to the United States, I started using Steam a little bit before. But when I came here is that I actually started buying games through it, because I had all these games stored in my mind, and I was like, I want to play them again, but I don't have them here. So there was this opportunity to be able to find Civilization 3, for example. That was a game that my uncle used to play way back, and he had installed it in my grandma's computer, which I know it's like my uncle was playing my grandma's computer, and then I would go there to my grandma's place, and the game would be there. So it was like, yeah, I want to play that game.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that was an opportunity for me to find that game, something that I hadn't seen before, find a bunch of games that I didn't even know existed, and just like open my mind to so many different things that I wouldn't find in a store because maybe the store didn't have it. So it's like this, just opening my eyes to many different things. Doesn't mean that I was gonna just spend my money in all of these games, new games that I was seeing, but it was just this experience of going there and it's like, oh, I can find that one. It's so easy to just find it. And not only that one, but like I started playing like different kinds of games. I remember this one called Don't Starve. I don't know if you've played it. It's like a survival game. And you have to go around and everything kills you. Basically, everything kills you. So everything that you do must be to not die. Right, and like the different characters have like different weaknesses and strengths, and it's like, okay, one character is afraid of the night. So if the night comes and you don't have something to like light up, then it starts like losing. What was it? What was the name of it? Anyway, like sanity or something like that. And if your sanity reached like a certain level, you would die. So everything kills you. So anyway, but that was one of those games that I found just searching the Steam catalog, right? You know, there was another one, Mountain Blade, that I didn't know how to find the actual.
That one I know.
You know that one?
I know Mountain Blade.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that game. But anyway, I never found a physical copy. It was always like, oh, this friend is playing it, so he would let me play it in his computer, or let me play it, so I would have my character in their computer. But just until I actually found the digital opportunity to buy that game to actually start playing was that I was able to do it. So it's like there are these pros and cons to each one of them. I still like talking about the booklet, digital. Now we have Google, so I would go into Google and start finding like all the specs, all the little things, the little tricks, hints, cheat codes, and things like that. Just whenever like I got tired of certain different things. So I wouldn't know if I prefer digital over physical. It's just a different experience. Both of them.
Well, and you triggered me a little bit mentioning cheat codes, because nowadays games don't have them. They're just like microtransactions. It's like it's basically cheat codes have been replaced with microtransactions. It's like, well, you can have God mode. Yeah, it's just going to cost you $4.99.
Interesting.
It's just, I don't know. I'm just a little bitter about that.
I think for me, again, the pros and cons. I think physical copies are on their way out for most machines, with the possible exception of Nintendo. Nintendo is still writing cartridges hard and things like that. So I don't think Nintendo is going to switch anytime soon. And again, there's positives and negatives. The positive with physical cartridges, at least, or discs in the past, is again, you could share them with a friend. And so, friends could try a game before they actually try it. Redbox now, you can rent games and try it for a couple days. And, hey, I kind of like this game. I'll go out and buy it. So as long as there's physical copies for that, I think that would be good.
Just reminded me of something, but it's true. Like, I remember when one friend, as I said, when one friend had the game, then we would all go to that friend's place, and it's like, oh yeah, you have the game, so we're gonna just connect with you, and not like, oh yeah, you have the game, so I'm gonna connect with you. But it's kind of like, oh, you have the game, so it's an opportunity. Yeah, no, you're not gonna change one on the other, but it's kind of like that opportunity of actually going to there. And I know that Steam has this thing like, oh yeah, give the gift of a game to a friend, something like that. It's like a gift thing that they have, but it's not the same. It's still like going to one place, that physical connection anyway.
Yep. Yeah. Also, with physical copies, you could resell it easily. Again, we were talking about GameStop. Negative is GameStop didn't give you a lot of money for it, but or you could sell it to a friend and they would give you probably a better deal than GameStop. Yes, we're talking about you, GameStop.
Like $1 for like a new game. Are you kidding me? Like this came like a month ago. Like
GameStop, get better.
I have a pristine collection of all the Metal Gear Solid games going back to the original PlayStation. And they're like the Pawn Stars of games. Like, best I can do is $420. For 17 games. I like 3 years after the Wii came out, like the original Wii before the Wii U. I had the console and a bunch of games and other stuff that I just really didn't care about anymore. And I didn't have anyone who cared enough to just take it. So I was like, well, I'll just go to GameStop and see if I can get money for it. It was like $25 cash for like the console, 4 controllers, like 10 games. And I was just like, man.
There you go. Pros and cons for digital. Again, we've mentioned a bunch of them. Digital's more convenient. Again, you can just download something, do something while it's downloading, and then you can get out and play it. They do have, we were talking about this earlier, they do have sales for digital at special times, like Steam has their famous summer sale and stuff like that. So you can get some cool discounts on games. And then to what John mentioned, do you really own the game, though, is the big, huge issue that we're dealing with. And we're also in this stage now, we're about to transition to a new console generation. PS5 is definitely coming out. It's going to be a physical thing. Xbox, we're seeing what they're going to do. But Google has this new thing, Stadia, which is not a console. It's going to be totally digital format. So you just connect to either a Google browser, or if you have a Chromecast, you can use that, and they're doing all the processing on the back end, and you just play the game. And so it's kind of, again, another revolution. We'll see how well it does. When I did some research, they say when you buy a game, you do own it, even though it's digital, but we'll see how that goes. So again, there's pros and cons to both. I think digital is the most convenient now, but you do lose a lot of, again, just sharing games, being able to resell and stuff like that. And one last point real fast, a lot of physical copies of games now come, as you guys are talking about, even if you put the disc in, you have to download a day one patch. Or a lot of them are just coming with a card that says download the game anyway, even when you buy a physical copy. So
there was when Call of Duty World War II came out, I got it like a month later on a Black Friday sale. Bought it in store at Target because it had the best deal. Get the box home, open it up. It's got a Steam key inside. And I was like,
what in the
why
world?
couldn't I just buy it off Steam for this price at that point?
For that price.
You were
Joel, you're saying?
Joel?
No, I was just going to say, like, if you go on to like GOG.com, then they don't have many games, but like when you buy the game, then you can install that as many times as you want to different computers. So that's like a pretty neat, because Steam doesn't have that. No. But GOG has that, so that's a way that you actually keep your game on that one, and then if you do have a friend, then you can gift them that game and things like that, because you actually own it at that point.
Another interesting thing, I believe Xbox Gold is same as PS Plus, but PS Plus you get free games and by just having that subscription service. But you can only access those games while you still have the subscription going, is my understanding for that. So again, even do you own those games, or is it just a benefit as long as you have that subscription? And we're talking about ownership here, and I think that gets to our fifth point. We're talking about ownership. So that was our subtle break.
Take it away, Derek. You can do this. Beautiful segue. Beautiful segue.
So speaking about ownership, again, we've focused a lot about, do you own digital games or not? and just bringing it to real life, I think sometimes we get this thought of, do we own the things that we have bought or earned? And what I mean by this is, I think especially in the Western world, we have a big ethic on working hard, paying for what you want, and then I own it. I should be able to do what I want with it. And sometimes we feel that way about our life as well. But the Bible says some interesting things. The Bible says that God actually bought us with a price. We are actually owned by Him. And even the stuff, even when we work hard for stuff, God gave us the gifts, the talents to do that. And God actually owns everything. He just puts us in charge of that. And so when we think about ownership when it comes to our life and to God, like there's some interesting concepts that come from that. So what do you guys think about that idea of ownership when it comes to relating to God and faith?
Yeah. Well, in Psalm 24, I wrote this down earlier. The earth is the Lord's and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it. Job 41:11, everything under heaven is mine. And it was God talking. And there's even more verses, a lot of examples of God saying, this is mine. Like, I own this. I own everything. He created everything. So that's when you have that Christian perspective of God being the creator of the universe, then to fully understand what that means. Right. So like I get this idea that if I make something, if I make a game, like I'm a game developer, if I make it, it's mine. It's got my stamp on it. I created it. But if God created you, if God created the earth and He created everything inside of it, then you're working with His materials. So whose is it really? If you work for a tech company more often than not, and you create something on your own time, they usually have the rights to it. It's in the job contract that you signed. Anything that you create under their sphere of influence, even if you do it outside of work time, belongs to them. So if God owns everything in the world and we're creating something within that sphere of influence, it really is His, and it's not ours. That's what I got for now.
Yeah. What I think like the story that comes to mind is like when David, at the end of, I think it's first like Kings or I believe it's probably second Kings. I don't remember which one. The point is that there's a sin that he like does, and the Lord says, well, either I'm gonna have 3 like days of death or 3 like months of X or 3 years. It's like just a story. I'm kind of saying it wrong, but the point is that at the end of it, then he has to buy this field, and he arrives at this guy's place to buy this, and the man who like owns the field says, you can have it because you are the king. Go and have it. And he says, no, I am going to pay a price for this field. I'm going to actually show you that this is worth, and show before the Lord the worth of this. So even though he had a place to actually take like the field, say, I am king, given the field, he said, no, I'm going to pay a price for it. And the same that God did with us, Jesus could have just come down and said, you are mine, bow like down or die now. And he could cut that, but he said, no, I'm going to pay a price to show like you the worth of this, to like stop death from coming in. Because the main reason why David had to buy that field is because like death was just coming in, and over 3 like days people were just dying. And like once he bought that field, then like it all stopped right there. So same as when Christ buys us, then the death of sin gets cut off at the very place that we're bought from. And it's bought with silver, so that also alludes back to Jesus when he was trade as well for some silver coins. So there's a lot of stuff. There's very rich stuff in that story, and I believe that we are definitely owned by God, but He is not just saying you are mine or I'm gonna kill like you. He's saying I'm gonna show like you your worth, and I'm gonna buy like you out, but you like still have to be the one to step in. So
cool.
Yeah.
That's good.
No, I was thinking about exactly the same thing. Yeah, he came and bought us, but we were already His because He created us. But at the same time, He was like, okay, if you believe that it's not like that, I'm gonna go and buy you. If that's because you were stolen from me, basically, and it's because we stole ourselves, which is kind of like just a different topic, but kind of like we stole ourselves. It's like fine. So He came and He bought us with his blood. So it's, but I got nothing right now. I got nothing.
I mean, you really hit the nail on the head there, Joel, that and you had alluded to that at the beginning, that we were bought with a price. And that price was Jesus's life, right? And in Romans 1, the letter that Paul writes, it opens with, I, Paul, a bondservant of Christ Jesus. And the interesting thing is the Greek word for bondservant is doulos. And of all of the words in Greek, when you're doing translation work that can mean so many different things and have all these different ideas of what they are, doulos means one thing. It only ever means one thing. It can't mean anything else. There's no nuance to that word whatsoever. It means slave. And it always means slave. Every time it's used, it never means anything else. So there's no question about what Paul is saying when he says doulos Christou Jesu, slave of Christ Jesus. The interesting thing, though, is that doulos, it necessitates an owner. If you are a slave, you are owned by someone. And the word for Lord is kurios. And kurios can't be used without doulos. Lord is another word for owner. So he owns us. We are the slave. He is the Lord. And you have to have either of those words. They require the other to be complete, right? You can't have a slave without an owner, and you can't have an owner unless they own something, right? So that's the doulos in the story. So Paul recognizes that he is owned by Christ, right? The interesting thing about all of that is that there's so much freedom in realizing that we were bought with a price.
Yeah.
Because if Christ owns me, then I can't take credit for my successes. But if I can't take credit for my successes, I also can't take credit for my failures. And that doesn't mean that I have this, like Paul says, where sin abounds, so too grace abounds. But should we use that as an excuse to sin? No, definitely not. We shouldn't. But it means that the shame that goes along with messing up doesn't have to be there. Now, we shouldn't mess up on purpose, and we should always strive to be better people, but we don't have to be racked with guilt every time we make a mistake. There's hope. There's hope because Christ came and bought us. I think one of the best ever illustrations of that in media is in Les Miserables. When Jean Valjean purchases Cosette, there's this scene where he basically buys her this is it Cosette or is Cosette the mother? I don't know. Anyone? So he's buying this girl, and these three like really scummy guys are like, well, how much money do you have? And so he offers what would be considered a fair price for her, and they say, oh, it's going to be more than that. So he basically doubles down, more than that. He ends up emptying out his wallet for her at great personal cost to himself. He purchases her in order to save her from those people. Now, he could have gone in guns blazing, right, or whatever, gone in with a sword and taken out these horrible people and rescued her that way. But he chose instead to give sacrificially of himself. Christ didn't come to destroy the Roman kingdom. He didn't come to usurp everyone on earth and kill all the bad people. He came in order to sacrifice himself to save us. And so that transfer of ownership to him was this beautiful moment of sacrifice, not this angry, just wrathful encounter. It's just beautiful.
You just made me think about something, and yeah, it is beautiful. It is. We think about games, and the more we pay for a game, the more we want to invest in it, because the more we had to sacrifice of ourselves to actually get it. Let's say a game costs, I don't know, $60, and then another one 120. So it's like, oh, I want to invest more in the other one.
You better get more playtime out of that one.
Yeah, you better get more playtime, and you better. Well, anyway, we're not gonna get into development, but yeah, that's basically because it's like, this costs me more, right? Yeah. To be able to purchase this game, I'm gonna enjoy it even more. What if it costs double than that? What if it was $240? What if I'm gonna buy a console that's $1,000? Then it's like, oh yeah, well, it's because I'm gonna use it. I'm investing in it. And Jesus came and he paid everything that he had, his own life. Like he was like, I don't care. I'm gonna just give myself away, like completely. everything. Would you, if we were to think about it, like, would we give ourselves in that way for a game? Like it's like, okay, so it made me think in that, because it's like if we were to give our own life to a game, then we would invest our whole life in it, because it's like what it costs, right? And Jesus did that, and he is willing to invest his whole life in us. And then we don't think it that way, because it's like, oh, well, we're not worthy. Oh, well, it's because this and that, and he doesn't want me, or he doesn't like me, or how can he love me? And all of these thoughts go in our mind. But it's like he already showed that you are worthy for him to pay the ultimate price for you. He already showed you that he loves you. He already showed you that he wants you so much that he gave himself, well, fully, right? So it's like this thought. It's like, where are you now? Are you willing to accept even what you are worth? Not only because it's not only about like, okay, yeah, he paid it, he's perfect, but are you gonna come to the understanding of who God thinks you are, how much you are worth, that you are worth Jesus' life, Jesus' blood, that you are worth so much, and that you can be free of everything else because of that same reason. And what you said, like, we don't have to live with this shame, with this guilt, with this depression, with this anxiety, because at the end of the day, we're his. It's like, well, do everything that you want with me. Basically, it's like, I'm yours to use as you want. And that's the best decision that I believe we could all have. We could all choose. It's kind of like just give ourselves away the same way that he gave himself to us. One prayer that I always have is like, God, give me a deeper understanding of your love, and give me a deeper understanding of your sacrifice to see how much I'm worth. Because it's like every time that it goes a little bit deeper, it's like, okay, now I understand even more of me. And give me an understanding of how much it costs you to be able. There's this song, and this goes in a different way. I'll never know how much it costs. How is it? I'll never know how much it costs to...
Yeah, I know that song. I know that
okay.
song. Yep.
Something about my sins upon the cross.
To see my sin upon the cross. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But
How
it's
much
like,
it costs to see my sins up on that cross.
Yeah. And I love that song. It's like, okay, it's wonderful, but I do want to know. I want to know how much it costs, because I want to know how much I'm worth to you. I want to know how much I'm worth to God. I want to know how much. You know, it's like, okay, maybe I'll never know, because I understand I'll never get to that place of how much God had to give to come down from heaven, to leave his throne, to become as a servant, as it says in Philippians 2, to become as a slave, to become even to the lowest of the lowest, even to die of the death of the cross. But I do want to know. At least I want to keep having a deeper understanding of what it costs. Because I don't want to live in a place, it's like, oh, I'll never know, so I don't even want to try. And it's like I'm worth nothing. No, I do want to know how much it costs. So anyway,
I think that's good. I think the value,
that doesn't need to be ended with anyway. That was great.
I think what you're saying is the value of something is usually measured by how much someone's willing to pay for it. And if God's willing to give his own son for us, how valuable we are. And just a few last thoughts before we wrap up.
Thank you.
I think we're talking two different concepts as far as there are some people who might watch this and say, hey, I worked hard for this new car, or, I put in the work, I put in the hours, I went to school for this education, I've done all this stuff. And my response to that is, yeah, you did. Great job. And you should be applauded for that. But 1 Peter 4:10 says, God has given each of us a gift, a talent from his great gift, a spiritual gift. So who gave you the ability to do all those things that you're doing, whether it's an artist, a student, or whatever? God has given us that raw material. Yes, we're responsible to go and do stuff with it, but even along the way, God opens opportunities for us. He sustains us. And so I think we just need to remember that. Also, God rewards us when we do well, with the things that he's given us. We know that from Matthew 25, the parable of the talents, when God gives something, hey, I'm putting you in charge of these resources, and I'm going to reward you based on how well you do with that. But the last thing, and we keep circling this, and I think it's great. My youth group, my last youth group that I ran, our nickname was H2O, which means his number 2 own, because God owns us 2 ways. 1, he created us, and 2, he bought us back with a price. And Amen. So again, when we're talking about ownership, ultimately I belong to God. So ultimately, that should change how I live my life, how I spend my time, how I spend my resources, because ultimately it should reflect the value and the price that God paid for me.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Yeah.
It's an easy way of putting it. I know I went on a rabbit trail.
No, those were that was.
It's like
yeah.
when you pay $1,000 for like a Mac stand, you want to get the best one you can get. You know, you really want to invest.
What are you doing, Apple?
That's all I got.
And on that note,
I want to. The last thing I want to say, and then we'll say goodbye, is there's a line in a song that I really like. It's your body isn't yours; it's God's temple that wasn't loaned to you to get foreclosed on. Like this gift of life that we have is a loan from God. He didn't have to breathe life into me. I didn't have to be the fifth child of my parents, but I was, and that was a gift from God. And He didn't give me this gift to squander it and to waste it.
Amen.
And ultimately, my body is His temple. In every facet, my thoughts, my physical body, my spirit. And so I have to give it back day in and day out. And it's not because I owe Him anything, because I could never pay Him back. And He doesn't want me to try and pay it back. That's not what this is about. It's like what you said. Like, I want to know what it cost so that I can see how much I'm worth. Not so that I can try and pay it back, but so I can appreciate how much I'm worth. So thank you for that. Thank you, all of you, for being here. And thank you for watching. And we'll see you next week.
See you.
You put! I say that.